Truistory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, Truistory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Michael Winters stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his sleek Chicago high-rise, watching the traffic pulse along Lakeshore Drive as dusk settled over the city. At 28, he had everything a young professional could want: a corner office at a thriving distribution firm, a polished black SUV idling in the subterranean garage, and a meticulously curated condo in Lincoln Park, steps from the lakefront trail. Yet despite the skyline's glittering promise, Michael felt a hollow ache whenever he caught his own reflection in the glass, his tailored navy suit and confident smile masking a restless uncertainty. Across town, 30-year-old Rachel Jacobs was closing up Rachel's Diner, her cozy neighborhood spot on Halsted Street known for oversized pancakes, bottomless coffee, and the kind of warm conversation that restored people's faith in community. A single mother who'd built the place from scratch following a painful divorce, Rachel understood what it felt like to crave stability. She wiped down the last table, her hands still trembling from the day's ups and downs, especially after turning away a customer who'd complained about wait times despite the diner's morning rush. Running a business wasn't glamorous. It was a balancing act between passion and persistence. An hour earlier, Michael had lingered over scrambled eggs and bacon, not because he was hungry, but because he needed a refuge. The weekly board meeting had stretched late into the afternoon, and he'd missed dinner with his wife, Nicole. At 25, Nicole was vivacious and free-spirited, a marketing consultant who relished Chicago's nightlife and the retail therapy of Michigan Avenue's designer boutiques. Their marriage, barely 2 years old, had begun under the glow of ambition. She supported his career goals, and he admired her flair for living fully. But lately, their desires seemed to drift in opposite directions. Rachel remembered Michael's soft-spoken gratitude that morning. He had thanked her for the real breakfast, as though the diner offered something no power breakfast in the Loop could match. He spoke of missing home, of craving a genuine connection rather than endless conference calls and KPI dashboards. Something in his tone resonated deep within Rachel, a reminder of her own quest for belonging, of late nights spent pacing her apartment, wondering if she'd ever find someone who saw beyond her diner's neon sign to the person beneath. That same evening, in a stylish condo less than 10 miles away, Nicole Winters slipped into a fitted wrap dress in front of the vanity mirror. She dabbed on a final swipe of berry red lipstick and scrutinized her reflection, poised, polished, ready for a girl's night out at the rooftop bar in River North. She deserved this. Nicole had spent weeks on client presentations and campaign launches, sacrificing her social life. She tossed a sequined clutch onto the bed, grabbed her keys, and texted Michael with a quick, "I'll be late, get takeout?" red heart, before slipping into the city's electric night. Back at Rachel's Diner, Michael paid his check and stepped out into the cool breeze. He should have been at home setting the table or lighting candles, gestures that once meant everything to him, but instead, he found himself drawn here, to a place where the coffee was strong and the conversation genuine. The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a welcoming glow on the sidewalk. He paused, letting the soundscape of utensils clinking and low-key rock music soothe the tension in his shoulders. Across the street, a mural of Chicago's skyline reminded him that life was more than quarterly targets and sales forecasts. He thought of Nicole's laugh, ringing bright as a bell, a sound he rarely heard anymore amid the silence of his condo hallway. He thought of the day he proposed, on a snowy afternoon along the Magnificent Mile, and how both of them had promised to build something lasting. But somewhere between late-night strategy sessions and trendy brunch spots, her gaze flicking to the door every few seconds, she wondered whether Michael would come back tomorrow, or if she'd simply imagined the warmth in his eyes. Her ex-husband had left her expecting she'd crumble without him. Instead, she'd built this place from the ground up, creating a refuge for people like Michael and herself. As streetlights illuminated the empty tables, Michael slipped back inside and approached the counter. He caught Rachel's eye with a small, grateful smile. "One more coffee," he said quietly. And in that moment, two people seeking connection, one craving freedom, the other craving family, found themselves unwittingly woven into each other's stories, both yearning for something real in a city that moved too fast to notice aching hearts. That night, Chicago's skyline watched over them both, Michael, standing in the shadow of his own success, and Rachel, the resilient keeper of her little corner of warmth, each on the cusp of a journey neither could have predicted, a journey toward understanding what truly makes a house a home. Michael Winters parked his black SUV in the underground garage of his Lincoln Park condo, heart still racing from a back-to-back series of boardroom meetings. He carried a bouquet of pale pink peonies, Nicole's favorite, and a bag of groceries for a homemade meal he had planned. As he rode the elevator up to the 20th floor, he rehearsed the evening in his mind: avocado toast appetizers, seared salmon with lemon butter sauce, and a bottle of chilled Chardonnay he had been saving for a special occasion. Stepping into his living room, Michael flicked on the soft overhead lights. The dining table gleamed under a linen runner. Two place settings were meticulously arranged. He placed the flowers in a slender vase center stage, then set to work chopping herbs and zesting citrus. The apartment filled with a comforting medley of sizzling garlic and fresh basil. Michael felt a familiar warmth spread through him. This was home. This was what he'd envisioned when he said, "I do." Just as he lowered a flaky salmon fillet onto a porcelain plate, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Nicole, running late. Grabbing takeout. "See you at home." A knot tightened in Michael's chest. Takeout? On a Friday night? After everything he'd planned? He tapped out a reply, "But I'm cooking dinner. Remember?" Then added a frown emoji and handed his phone to the side. The windows framed a panorama of Chicago's skyline as Michael plated the last dish. Everything looked perfect, but a quiet dread gnawed at him. The rhythmic clang of pots and pans, the hum of the refrigerator. Even the soft jazz playing on his speaker now felt like a countdown to disappointment. 20 minutes later, Michael's watch reads 7:45 p.m. He reheated the Chardonnay in the freezer and poured 2 glasses, watching the light catch the delicate stems. Still no answer from Nicole. He checked his phone again, no response. At 8 p.m., the door clicked open. Nicole swept in, hair tousled and makeup still impeccable from her after-work event. She carried a glossy paper bag branded with a high-end Thai restaurant logo and a reusable wine tote dangling from her wrist. "Hey," she called, tossing her keys into the bowl by the door. "I grabbed dinner on my way back. Hope that's okay." Michael set down the wine glasses. "Okay." His voice was calm, but the corners of his mouth twitched. "I made dinner, Nicole. We talked about this last night. I got groceries, flowers. I planned a whole menu." Nicole paused in the kitchen entrance, an eyebrow arching. "I know. I saw your text, but I was running late. My project deadline blew up and I couldn't get back in time. So I ordered pad thai and dumplings. You'll eat with me, right?" She smiled, expecting him to melt. Instead, Michael felt hollow. He took a slow breath. "It's not just the food. It's that we don't sit down to eat together anymore. We don't talk about our days. We're drifting." Nicole shrugged and began unpacking containers. "Michael, it's a Friday night. I'm tired. I want to relax. I haven't seen my friends all week. Tomorrow's brunch is huge for my networking, and I needed some me time. You pushed me so hard about dinner and now a family, but what about my life?" He set one of the plates aside and met her gaze. "Your life and mine should include this. A marriage means sharing a meal. It means carving out time for each other." Nicole's lips tightened. "Not every night, not every week. Some things I enjoy, shopping with the girls, a late-night rooftop bar. Those keep me balanced. You can't expect me to be a homebody like you." A sudden ache hit Michael's chest. He remembered the early days of their relationship, laughing over street vendor tacos, dancing at summer festivals, long drives with no destination but a shared playlist. They dreamed of building a life where adventure and comfort coexisted. Now he felt like he was holding on to a script she no longer wanted to follow. He lowered his eyes. "I'm not asking you to be a homebody. I'm asking for us, for a chance to reconnect." He gestured to the candles he had lit. "Even once in a while. I set the table for us." Nicole opened a container of pad thai and snorted. "Your table setting is beautiful. But I don't want salmon tonight. I want pad thai and dumplings and some space. I'll eat here. You can finish cooking for yourself." She arranged her folding chair at the edge of the table, laptop balanced on one knee. She began scrolling through emails. Michael's voice trembled as he answered, "Then maybe we're not on the same page anymore." She glanced up, surprised by the sharpness in his tone. We just have different pages." He forced a steadying breath. "We used to be a team. Now it feels like I'm the only one trying." He folded his arms, leaning against the counter. "I want us to be partners." Nicole rolled her eyes, stabbing at a piece of chicken with her fork.
"Fine.
If all you want is partnership, why don't you partner with someone who actually wants to eat your fancy meals?" "I don't know what you expect me to say." The words hit him like a slap. He looked at her, at the woman he loved, and saw distance where there once was intimacy. The rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock felt deafening. Michael picked up his glass of wine, raised it half-heartedly, and said, "To drifting apart." Nicole blinked, then smirked. "Stay thirsty, I guess." He finished the wine in a single swallow. "Good night, Nicole." His voice was void of warmth as he turned and walked toward the bedroom, peony petals rustling softly on the floor. Nicole barely registered his departure, engrossed in her screen. The only sounds left in the condo were the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled beats from the living room speakers. Michael closed the bedroom door behind him and leaned against it, sliding down until he sat on the cold hardwood floor. He pressed his forehead to the door, chest tight with grief and frustration. In that moment, the plate of uneaten salmon and the half-empty pad thai containers seemed like physical symbols of a marriage losing its flavor. Outside, Chicago's nightlife continued. Laughter drifting from rooftop bars, honking horns on Michigan Avenue, the distant thrum of music. Inside, Michael felt as though he was living in a silent movie, motion without sound, connection without feeling. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over Rachel's Diner app, where he had bookmarked that warm, comforting spot just days ago. A part of him knew that his attempts to bridge the gap at home might succeed, or might drive him further away. But as the weight of the evening pressed on him, he realized with a pang that he needed more than half-hearted takeout exchanges. He needed authenticity. Curling into the corner, Michael allowed himself a single, honest question. If they couldn't even share dinner, what hope did they have of sharing anything else? He stared at the door for a long minute, breathing in the scent of peony petals and stale takeout grease. Then, in the quiet aftermath of their clash, Michael made a decision. The next time he felt adrift, he would seek out genuine connection, whether at home or across town at Rachel's Diner, because just getting by was no way to live, and just eating was no way to love. Morning light filtered through the pale gray blinds of Michael and Nicole's Lincoln Park condo, falling in soft, stripe-patterned shafts across the polished oak floors. The city beyond the window was already stirring. Delivery trucks rumbled down nearby streets, joggers dashed past on the lakefront path, and the distant hum of the Brown Line train echoed off brick facades. Inside, however, a heavy stillness reigned. Michael sat at the glass-topped breakfast table, his posture rigid and uncertain. Before him lay a single plate of half-eaten French toast, crisp edges tinged golden brown, center soggy with maple syrup, like a promise half-kept. He cradled a steaming mug of dark roast coffee, its aroma rich and bitter, and watched the thin tendrils of steam twist upward. Every inhale felt like a countdown to the conversation he'd been dreading since the moment he woke. Across from him, leaning against the marble countertop, stood Nicole. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and she wore a crisp white blouse paired with tailored black trousers, her power outfit for client meetings. On the counter beside her lay the open lid of a laptop, notifications blinking with morning emails already demanding her attention. She tapped at the keyboard, brows furrowed, as though hoping the reds might vanish if she stared long enough. Finally, Michael set his mug down with a decisive clink. He straightened, smoothing the front of his button-down shirt, and cleared his throat. "Nicole, can we talk?" Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't look up immediately. "About dinner?" she asked, pressing a finger against the trackpad. He shook his head, the muscles in his jaw working.
"No."
"Something more important." Nicole raised an eyebrow, swiveling her chair to face him. "More important than sales targets?" Her tone was guarded. "I'm on deadline, can this wait?" He drew in a breath of that rich coffee scent and let it out slowly. "I wish it could, but I need 5 minutes before you run off into the office." He reached across the table and placed an envelope stamped in neat handwriting beside her coffee mug. "I've been thinking about us, about our future. Please, just review this." She frowned, pulling the envelope closer. The return address was his. Michael and Nicole Winters. She hesitated, then peeled it open. Inside was a large manila folder labeled Family Planning in crisp block letters. She blinked and closed it sharply. "Really?" she said softly. "You made a folder?" He nodded, sinking onto the chair opposite her. "I want to talk about having a child." His voice was steady, but gentle. "Not because I'm nagging you, but because I love you, and I believe starting a family could bring us closer." Nicole's lips pressed into a thin line. She shut her laptop with a controlled snap and folded her arms. The morning sunshine, once warm, now felt intrusive, exposing fault lines neither was ready to acknowledge. "Michael, I'm 25, she said slowly. "My clients expect late nights, early mornings. I'm finally on the verge of making senior consultant. How can I balance that with motherhood?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I know your career matters to you, more than anything. It matters to me, too. But we don't have to do this all at once. We can plan, test the waters." He lifted his mug as though to toast. "Just an afternoon at my sister's daycare. No commitments beyond that." Nicole's gaze darted to the French toast, syrup glinting like amber. "Test the waters," she echoed, voice taut. "I volunteered at that daycare once, flew in at dawn, left at dusk with my head pounding. I barely saw you. That wasn't quality time, it was chaos." "I'm not asking you to become a full-time caregiver," he insisted. "I'm asking us to consider it. I miss sharing my day with you, when you used to tell me about your lunch break and the barista who spelled your name wrong. Now I'm scrambling through emails while you're out having dinner with friends." She bristled. "My dinners with friends keep me sane. Remember who I am, Michael. I'm the person who sketched marketing campaigns at midnight in college, not the girl who stayed home reading parenting blogs." He closed his eyes, fighting the impulse to reach across the table. Instead, he folded his hands, revealing a small booklet of baby names. "I picked a few names, just for fun." He slid the booklet toward her. "Look at these with me." She hesitated, then flipped it open. The pages were glossy and cheerful. Ethan, Olivia, Jackson, Ava. She thumbed through, expression inscrutable. "Jackson," she mouthed, "reminds me of our neighbor's kid." He offered a small, earnest smile. "That's why I like it strong, simple. And Ava, my grandmother's name. I thought you might like that." Nicole closed the booklet, setting it aside. "I can't pretend I'm as excited as you are," she admitted. Her voice softened but remained guarded. "You know I love your family, I really do. I love your niece and nephew. But having my own, I don't know if I want to give up my independence." Michael's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, hips shifting to create space. He lowered his own hand, nearly disappointing a courage he'd summoned that morning. "Independence," he whispered. "Nicole, marriage was supposed to be about partnership, two equals sharing everything. Why is us suddenly more terrifying than me?" She rounded on him, eyes flashing. "Because us used to mean dinners at Chi-Town Bistro and road trips to Milwaukee. Now us means diapers." Sleepless nights, PDA meetings. I can't. He held up a hand. It doesn't have to be that. We can do it our way. We can share it. I want to support you. Pay for a night nurse, hire a cleaning service. Whatever you need. I just want us together. You once told me you'd love to wake up to a baby's laughter, not an alarm clock. She exhaled, gaze dropping to the floor. That was before we got married. Her voice cracked slightly. Before the last 2 years of endless meetings and me feeling invisible in my own home. Silence fell between them. Michael stared at her, picturing the woman he'd married, bright-eyed and fearless. Now she looked wary, as though the weight of his question had aged her overnight. Finally, Nicole shook her head, gathering her composure. I can't do it, not yet. She met his gaze, voice trembling. I'm not ready to lose myself. Michael's heart sank. He felt the room growing colder, as though the city beyond had stopped humming. Yet beneath his disappointment stirred a resolve he couldn't ignore. Okay, he said softly. Not yet. But let's agree to revisit this, say, every 6 months? I don't want us to close the door on it forever. She blinked, surprise flickering. 6 months. She tapped a finger on the tabletop. We'll see. She exhaled a shaky breath. But no more baby name books, okay? I feel like I'm already 18 again, filling in my future family worksheets at camp. He cracked a wry smile. No more worksheets, he promised. Just open conversations. No pressure. Nicole nodded once, then rose and grabbed her laptop bag. She paused at the threshold, turning to him. Thank you for not pushing. She offered him a tentative smile. I know you mean well. Michael watched her walk away, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. When her footsteps faded, he lowered his gaze to the half-eaten French toast and empty coffee mug. The day's first light felt more promise than burden, a reminder that love sometimes meant letting go, even temporarily, so 2 people could breathe. He allowed himself one deep breath, then stood, gathering the folder of baby names and the coffee cups. As the city beyond arced into morning rush hour, Michael resolved to be patient, to keep the conversation alive without forcing a conclusion. Because though today he'd accepted not yet, he still believed in someday. And for the first time in weeks, that felt enough. After another restless night tossing in his Lincoln Park bedroom, Michael Winters awoke before dawn to an emptiness he couldn't shake. He dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark jeans, skipping the blazer for a change, and headed downstairs for a walk along the lakeshore. The air was cool and forgiving, and the city felt almost peaceful at 6:15 a.m. The joggers and dog walkers, not yet crowding the promenade. But the calm only underscored his loneliness. He craved something familiar, something that felt like home, without fully realizing why. He found himself driving north on Halsted Street, past the gleaming storefronts of Old Town, until he spotted the soft glow of a neon sign, Rachel's Diner. The building itself was unassuming. A single-story brick facade with large windows framed in teal trim. A vintage clock hung above the door, and a faded mural of pancakes and coffee cups peeked from one corner. He'd walked past it countless times on his morning commute, but had never stepped inside. Today, though, it beckoned him like a lighthouse to a ship in stormy seas. He parked on the street, grabbed his leather messenger bag, and pushed through the door. A small bell chimed overhead, and immediately he was enveloped in warmth, literally and figuratively. The air smelled of sizzling bacon, buttery pancakes, and fresh ground coffee. The decor was a comforting mix of retro and homey, vinyl booths in cherry red, formica tables, and framed black and white photos of Chicago landmarks. A chalkboard near the counter touted daily specials in playful script. Behind the counter, a woman with warm brown eyes and an easy smile was wiping down a row of mugs. She wore a denim apron over a floral blouse, and her hair was pulled back in a loose bun. Michael approached the counter, feeling slightly self-conscious in his business casual attire. "Good morning," he said, forcing a relaxed tone. "I'll have the breakfast sampler and a large coffee, please." She nodded, writing his order on a notepad. "Hey there, I'm Rachel. You must be new around here at this hour. Our sampler's popular. Eggs any style, sausage links, hash browns, pancakes. It'll fuel you for the day. He smiled, grateful. Sounds perfect. I could use something hearty. Rachel slid a chipped mug into his hand. Steam curled from the top. Coffee's on me for your first visit. What's your name? Michael, he replied, inhaling the rich roast. Thanks, Rachel. You own this place. She leaned against the counter, tucking a stray hair behind her ear.
Ida.
Been open for 7 years. It's my happy place. Built it after my divorce. I wanted a spot where people felt welcome, whether they're regulars or strangers in need of a friendly face. Michael found himself relaxing as she spoke. It's working. I feel that already.
She grinned.
Glad to hear it. Seat yourself anywhere. I'll bring your food right out. He chose a booth by the window, tucking the messenger bag beside him. Through the glass, the street was waking up. A baker unloaded fresh loaves, a newspaper vendor stacked papers on his stand, and a neighbor unlocked a bike rack. Inside, a handful of diners nursed coffee and scanned their phones. An elderly couple shared a newspaper. 2 college students joked over scrambled eggs. The atmosphere was quietly cheerful. Within minutes, Rachel appeared, carrying a large plate steaming with breakfast. The eggs glowed golden, the sausages crisp. The pancakes stacked 3 high and drizzled with maple syrup. She set the plate in front of him with a practiced ease. Enjoy, she said. Michael sank into the booth and took his first bite. Fluffy pancakes gave way to buttery sweetness. The eggs were cooked just right. The sausage was smoky and flavorful. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the flavors anchor him to the moment. So, Rachel said, perching on the edge of the booth. What brings you here before dawn? Not many people wander into my diner this early unless they have a routine or a crisis. She offered him a sympathetic smile. Michael chuckled, wiping his mouth. Routine, I guess. But maybe a little of both. He ran a hand through his hair. I've had a rough couple of weeks. Too much work, not enough balance. My wife and I have been drifting apart, and I needed a place to think. This felt right. Rachel nodded, as though she'd heard this story 100 times. Marriage can be hard. Life pulls you in different directions. But over pancakes and coffee, there's always a chance to reset. He appreciated her candor. That's exactly what I needed. He gestured at the plate. And this food, it's like a hug in diner form. Her eyes softened. That's the goal. You eat here enough. It stops feeling like a business. It stops feeling like anything else but home. He leaned back, taking another sip of coffee. I think I could use more of that. Rachel smiled and slid off her stool. I'll make note of that. By the way, if you ever need a quiet place to work or unwind, we've got free Wi-Fi and plugs under each booth. Bring your laptop. Have as many refills as you like. Michael laughed. That's generous. I might take you up on it. As Rachel bustled back to the kitchen, he scanned the diner with fresh eyes. The walls were covered in local memorabilia, a framed Cubs jersey, a retro Chicago Transit Authority sign, family photos donated by regulars. A small shelf displayed children's drawings, rainbow suns and stick-figure families, pinned up by parents after weekend brunch. It was clear this place meant more to the community than just good food. He finished his meal slowly, savoring each bite, and when the plate was empty, he sat in contented silence for a moment. The din of clinking dishes and low background chatter felt reassuring. He realized he hadn't felt this relaxed in months. Rachel returned with a pot of coffee. Bottomless, she reminded him, pouring a fresh cup. On the house. He smiled back. Thanks, Rachel. For everything. She paused, offering a genuine look. You're welcome, Michael. You come here anytime. We take care of our own. He nodded, feeling an unexpected surge of gratitude. I just might. Later, as he left the diner and stepped back into the crisp morning air, he felt more centered than he had in weeks. He paused on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath of the city's awakening energy. The neon sign of Rachel's diner glowed softly behind him, a beacon of warmth and stability in a life that had felt precarious. Driving back toward his condo, Michael reflected on the encounter. In Rachel's diner, he had discovered more than a tasty breakfast spot. He had found a reminder that connection and community could still exist amid the fast pace of Chicago life. He knew he would return, not just for the food, but for the welcoming atmosphere and the easy conversation that had rekindled something he thought he'd lost. And as he navigated the familiar streets toward home, he realized that before he could fix his marriage, he first needed to reconnect with the simple joys of shared experience. One pancake, one coffee, one genuine smile at a time. Over the next few weeks, Michael found himself arriving at Rachel's diner earlier and earlier each morning, drawn by an invisible pull he couldn't fully explain. He'd start his day in the same vinyl booth by the window, where the rising sun painted the street outside in warm golds and pinks, and where Rachel, ever watchful, would appear with the first pot of coffee, her apron dusted in flour, and a friendly smile on her face. Their initial exchanges, once limited to orders and small talk, quickly unfolded into deeper conversations that bridged the gap between diner owner and lonely customer and blossomed into a rare, genuine friendship. It began one Monday at precisely 7:03 a.m. when Michael, bleary-eyed after an all-night strategy call with overseas clients, slid into the booth as usual. He barely managed a nod before Rachel poured him a massive cup of dark roast coffee, the steam swirling like a promise. Instead of retreating behind his laptop, he let out a sigh of relief. "I thought I'd never escape that conference call," he admitted, leaning back and closing his eyes momentarily. Without a word, Rachel set down a plate he hadn't even ordered. Thick-cut bacon, 2 eggs over easy, and her famously buttery pancakes. Michael sat stunned for a beat. "What's this?" he asked, peering at the feast. She shrugged lightly. "How special on the house. You look like you need it." He broke into a grateful smile and dug in. No receipt, no fuss, just sustenance and kindness. A quiet camaraderie took root from moments like that. They began sharing stories. Michael confessing the loneliness that came with high-rise success, the weight of unrelenting targets, and the hollow ache of silent dinners at home. Rachel replying with tales of opening the diner after her divorce, raising her daughter Emma on her own, and the perpetual balancing act between payroll, renovations, and parenting. He learned that Rachel had built the diner in part to nurture community, to give neighbors a place to convene, and to offer weary souls a genuine smile and real food. She learned that Michael had once envisioned their condo as a sanctuary, only to find it echoing with arguments and unspoken frustrations. Their friendship deepened through small rituals and shared laughter. On Wednesdays, Rachel began setting aside a special batch of her cinnamon raisin toast just for Michael, a nod to his offhand comment that it reminded him of childhood Sunday breakfasts. On Saturdays, Michael arrived with fresh flowers from the farmer's market, placing them in a vase on the counter behind which Rachel worked. "For the best morning rescue service in Chicago," he'd say, and she'd roll her eyes dramatically but tuck the blooms into a tall pitcher anyway. Their exchanges grew playful, Michael teasingly offering to help flip pancakes when the diner got busy, and Rachel feigning shock. "You? Cook? I don't think society is ready for that," before arming him with an apron and sending him behind the grill to crack eggs under her watchful eye. One Friday morning, a surprise snowstorm blanketed Chicago in heavy flakes that drifted through the neon glow of Halsted Street. As the diner's door opened and closed with the gusty wind, customers made a surprised chorus of grumbles. The power flickered and died, plunging Rachel's diner into soft semi-darkness. A hush fell as pots clanged and burners sputtered. Rachel, ever undaunted, snapped her fingers. "Candlelit breakfast, anyone?" She dove under the counter for votive holders, lit dozens of candles, and placed them on every table. Michael watched from his booth as the diner transformed into a warm, flickering oasis amid the winter storm. Patrons leaned in, sharing slices of toast by candlelight, and children pressed their noses to the frosted windows. He caught Rachel's eye across the room. She winked and mouthed, "All under control." That crisis-averted forged an unspoken bond. He trusted her composure. She trusted his support. He later escorted stranded customers to their cars in the storm, and she served him extra hot coffee with a grateful nod. Their friendship wasn't confined to crisis management. Over lunch breaks, they brainstormed small improvements for the diner, a weekend jazz brunch experiment. Seasonal menu specials like berry-stuffed French toast in summer and pumpkin pecan waffles in fall. Michael helped Rachel draft a brief proposal for a Chicago Eats feature in a local magazine. The story ran, praising Rachel's diner as the heart of Lincoln Park, where neighbors gather and laughter is always on the menu. Foot traffic increased, but more importantly, Rachel saw in Michael not just a customer, but an ally who recognized her dreams and championed them. In turn, she became his secret advisor. One afternoon, Michael brought his laptop and a draft of a high-stakes presentation on the diner's counter. "I'm pivoting our sales focus towards storytelling," he explained, fidgeting with his pen. "But I'm worried I sound too emotional." Rachel leaned over, reading his bullet points. She tapped the screen decisively. "Those client testimonials, real quotes, add soul. Numbers alone are forgettable. People remember feeling." She paused, looking up. "Be unashamed of your humanity." He incorporated her feedback and later secured the deal, attributing the success in his follow-up email to a fresh perspective from a friend and community leader. Beyond business talk, their conversations wandered into personal dreams and regrets. On a quiet weekday evening, with the diner closed and the staff long gone, Rachel invited Michael into her tiny office tucked behind a swinging door. Pallets of canned corn lined one wall, a corkboard of community event flyers the other. She poured 2 glasses of something from a dusty bottle of red wine she'd hidden in a drawer. "I keep this for special occasions," she said with a grin. They toasted to unexpected friends and sipped as she revealed her lifelong wish to own a second location, a small cafe near the lake, and his confession that his true dream had always been to write a novel he never found time for. They laughed late into the night, trading book recommendations and pitching cafe designs to each other until both of them realized they were bleary-eyed and the candles had burned low. That night ended with an earnest moment. Rachel paused, glass in hand. "You've done so much for me, my diner, my spirit. Sometimes it feels like I'm the one offering you refuge," she said quietly. Michael set down his glass and reached out, placing a hand over hers. "You've done more for me than you know," he replied. "Here, I find purpose beyond profit, friendship, community, authenticity. You remind me what matters." She gave him a soft, sincere smile that lit up her entire face, and in that simple exchange they acknowledged how profoundly their friendship had changed them both. As Michael walked home that night, the city lights reflected in puddles of melting snow, he thought about his life before Rachel's diner. The corner office, the high-rise condo, the flawless presentations. All of it now felt incomplete without genuine connection. He realized he'd been chasing success at the expense of everything that truly grounded him: family, friendship, warmth. And he knew that whatever lay ahead, rebuilding his marriage, pursuing new professional goals, he would carry the lessons of his unexpected bond with Rachel, the power of listening, the courage to be vulnerable, and the simple magic of a shared meal. By early spring, their friendship had become a fixture in both their lives. Michael's wife, Nicole, noticed his calmer demeanor and asked what had changed. He simply smiled and said, "I discovered a place that feels like home." Nicole, intrigued, accompanied him one Saturday and found herself welcomed by Rachel's bright warmth and the diner's lively Sunday crowd. Over French toast and conversation, the two women exchanged stories, bridging the gaps that had once loomed so large. That day, for the first time in months, Michael saw the spark return to Nicole's eyes, and he felt hopeful that, with the right ingredients of patience and understanding, his marriage might find its way back to that same warmth. Through all of it, Rachel and Michael remained steadfast friends. He continued to drop in before dawn with fresh ideas and his own brand of quiet encouragement. She continued to fuel him with hearty breakfasts and candid advice. Their bond, a tapestry woven from countless cups of coffee, flickering candlelit brunches, shared victories, and honest conversations proved that true friendship can flourish in the unlikeliest of places and become the very foundation upon which new chapters of life are built. And amid the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation at Rachel's diner, they both discovered that when two people choose to uplift each other, they create a kind of family larger than blood, one sustained by empathy, trust, and the simple act of being present. By mid-spring, the strain between Michael and Nicole had become an unspoken undercurrent in their once vibrant marriage. After another tense breakfast, this time, curt nods in lieu of conversation and 2 steaming lattes left untouched, they arrived at the consensus neither had anticipated but both quietly knew was necessary. They would divorce. They chose a small family law practice in Lincoln Park, drawn by its reputation for mediation and collaborative resolution rather than courtroom drama. On a breezy Thursday morning, Michael parked his SUV across from the brick-faced office building and joined Nicole on the polished stone steps. She wore a tailored navy pantsuit and carried a slim briefcase. He met her in a crisp gray blazer and chinos. Their eyes met briefly. There was no malice, only a shared resolve to conclude this chapter without further hurt. Inside the conference room, they sat on opposite sides of a round table, a stack of forms before them. Their attorney, a calm woman named Sarah, opened with a reminder. An uncontested divorce, like yours, allows you to shape the outcome. You decide how to divide assets, address any financial obligations, and, if applicable, outline co-parenting arrangements. My role is to facilitate. Nicole exhaled softly. We have no children and our joint accounts are minimal. We agreed he would keep the condo. I'll take the SUV. Other assets, artwork, retirement contributions, we can split 50-50. Michael nodded, precisely as planned. We both worked hard to build these, and I want us both to walk away feeling respected. I'm grateful for the time we had. He met Nicole's gaze. I truly wish you success and happiness. A faint smile crossed Nicole's face. Likewise, Michael. Thank you for understanding my need for independence. She paused, pen poised over the first document. I know this is hard for both of us, but I'd rather be honest than continue drifting apart. The attorney guided them through the paperwork methodically: disclosure of assets, identification of separate property, waiver of alimony, and a final parenting clause marked not applicable. Each paragraph was read aloud. Each signature beside it represented acceptance of reality. Michael felt a bittersweet relief as he penned his name under petitioner, the room echoing with a faint scratch of pens on paper. When they reached the final form, judgment of dissolution of marriage, Nicole hesitated, letting the gravity of the moment settle. Michael offered her a small nod of encouragement. She exhaled and signed, laying down her pen with a soft thud. Their attorney gathered the documents. Congratulations in a way, she said kindly. You've executed an amicable separation. The court will review and issue a final decree in 30 days. Until then, you remain legally married, but your agreement is binding. She smiled, sliding the stack toward them. This is the piece that makes it official. Michael and Nicole took the decree together, each holding a corner. For a moment, they simply looked at the paper, then at each other. Goodbye, Nicole whispered, voice steady but soft. Goodbye, he echoed. They rose and moved toward the door side by side. A silent tableau of two people releasing what once bound them. In the hallway, Nicole paused. Thank you, she said, surprising Michael. Thank you for making this as painless as possible. He offered a gentle smile. Thank you for the years, Nicole. I hope we both find what we're looking for. She nodded, a small glimmer of warmth returning to her eyes. I think we will. Then she turned, and without another word, walked away, each step measured, carrying her toward independence. Michael stayed for a beat, absorbing the emptiness where their partnership once stood. Then he unlatched the door and stepped out into the spring sunlight, taking in the bright new day. He drove away in silence, the agreeable hum of the engine underscoring the peaceful end to their marriage. There were no lingering resentments, no bitter negotiations, only the mutual recognition that sometimes love means knowing when to let go. As he merged onto Fullerton Avenue, Michael reflected on how far he'd come since those early mornings of fractured communication. The divorce had been both an ending and a beginning. The fine print of separation had cleared the air, allowing him to move forward without regret. The weight that had settled on his chest at home felt lighter now, replaced by a cautious optimism. He remembered Nicole's final words, "I hope we both find what we're looking for," and realized they applied equally to him. Rachel's diner awaited, with its welcoming neon glow and the promise of genuine connection. Perhaps over coffee with Rachel, he would find a path toward renewal. For now, though, he let the city's rhythms guide him. The pulse of morning commuters, the distant chime of the L train, and the comforting certainty that life, like divorce paperwork, could be unraveled and rewritten, one careful choice at a time. Over the summer, Rachel's diner had become more than just a place of work for its 50-year-old owner. It was her lifeline. Every morning, she arrived at dawn, unlocking the teal-trimmed door and flicking on the neon sign that read Rachel's in warm cursive. She brewed coffee before sunrise, prepped fresh dough biscuits, and welcomed regulars like Michael with an unwavering smile. But beneath that determined exterior, Rachel carried the weight of mounting bills, her daughter Emma's upcoming braces, and mounting anxiety about keeping the diner afloat. One evening after closing, she met Derek, her ex-fiancé from 5 years ago, at an upscale bar downtown. They had parted ways years earlier when she discovered he was gambling away their joint savings, but he'd reappeared claiming to have changed. With a mixture of nostalgia and caution, Rachel agreed to a single drink. Within minutes, Derek had charmed her with triumphant stories of a new investment opportunity in a tech startup. Promising quick returns, he said, would cover the diner's renovation and Emma's orthodontics. Hesitant but desperate, Rachel reached for her phone to fact-check him. But Derek knocked it from her hand with a practiced excuse, "Let's not mix business and pleasure." Before she realized what was happening, he had whisked her credit cards away and convinced her to wire him $15,000 just to prove your trust. The next morning, bleary-eyed and hungover, Rachel discovered her checking account drained. The diner's rent overdue, and Emma's appointment canceled because the orthodontist hadn't received payment. Panic rose in her chest as she watched email alerts, NSF fees, missed payroll notices, landlord reminders. The neon glow of her diner suddenly felt cold and menacing. That very morning, Michael walked in before dawn, carrying a stack of flyers for an upcoming community fair he'd volunteered to help promote. He found Rachel at the counter, face buried in her hands, mascara streaked and apron crumpled. Her usual greeting was replaced by a quavering whisper. "Michael, I need help." Concern jolted through him as he pulled out the stool beside her. Without prompting, she spilled everything. The late-night rendezvous, Derek's smooth lies, the wire transfer, the empty accounts, the fear that tomorrow she couldn't pay the staff or keep the lights on. Rachel's voice cracked as she admitted how ashamed she felt, that she had been too trusting, too eager to solve her problems, and now everything was unraveling. Michael's mind raced. He'd never seen her so vulnerable. She was the pillar of her community, always uplifting others, never asking for aid. Yet here she was, pleading with him, eyes brimming for a lifeline. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder and leaned in close, blocking out the din of early customers trickling in for their coffee. "We'll figure this out together," he said firmly. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I don't know how. I don't have $15,000 to give back. I'm going to lose this place." The despair in her voice hit Michael like a physical blow. He sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he met her gaze with unwavering determination. "I believe in this diner. And I believe in you." Over the next hour, they worked through a rough plan. Michael offered to cover immediate payroll out of his own savings so that no one went unpaid. And he drafted an email to the landlord explaining a short delay in rent. He'd vouched for Rachel's reliability. She agreed, relief flooding her expression, though guilt flared anew. Next, They reviewed the books together, line by line, to see where she could cut expenses and potentially raise quick funds. Michael suggested hosting a community heroes brunch the following weekend, with all proceeds earmarked for a diner rescue fund. He himself would bake a special casserole, invite his corporate colleagues, and spread the word on social media. Rachel, blinking back tears, nodded, amazed at his generosity and energy. As the diner opened for breakfast, they shifted into problem-solving mode. Rachel cooked at the griddle, while Michael took orders, called in favors from local suppliers, and scribbled up cost estimates on a napkin. Between plates of blueberry pancakes and platters of eggs Benedict, they mapped out a schedule of fundraising events, silent auctions of donated gift certificates from neighborhood businesses, themed dinners where local bands played for tips, and even a charity car wash in the diner's parking lot. Rachel's fears gradually gave way to cautious optimism as she saw how many customers, loyal regulars, and curious newcomers stepped forward to pledge support. One elderly couple gave a check for $500. A group of college students organized a bake sale in the adjacent park. By midday, the register rang more frequently than it had in months. That afternoon, as they sat together at a corner booth reviewing the day's haul, already several $1,000s pledged, Rachel allowed herself to exhale. Michael had secured enough to cover nearly half her crisis costs within 24 hours. He placed his hand over hers and said quietly, "You don't have to go it alone anymore." She nodded, the knot in her chest loosening for the first time in days. "I was so ashamed," she admitted. "I thought asking for help made me weak." He shook his head vigorously. "Asking for help is the bravest thing you can do. It shows you care enough to fight." Driven by that renewed spirit, Rachel threw herself into the rescue plan. The next week saw themed dinners, Taco Tuesday and Waffle Wednesday, that drew crowds, with Michael acting as MC, sharing heartfelt stories of why the diner mattered. He even arranged for a local radio station to broadcast live from the booth one morning, interviewing Rachel about the fundraiser and encouraging listeners to contribute. Donations poured in. An anonymous patron covered her water bill, and a neighborhood developer pledged matching funds if Rachel met a certain threshold. Biscuits and gravy, once a sleepy morning staple, became a symbol of community solidarity. Throughout it all, Rachel felt a shift inside herself. The crisis had threatened to break her. But Michael's unwavering support taught her that vulnerability and connection were not failures, but pathways to resilience. When Emma stopped by after school to help hand out flyers, she found Rachel laughing with Michael as they counted envelopes of cash. The sight filled her young mother's heart with gratitude and pride. She hugged Rachel, whispering, "We'll be okay, Mom." And Rachel realized how much was truly at stake, and how priceless the network of care she was weaving had become. By the end of the fundraising week, Rachel's diner had not only covered the missing $15,000 but exceeded it, leaving a small cushion for future emergencies. On the final night, Michael and Rachel stayed late after last call. The diner cleaned and closed. He handed her an envelope thicker than she had dared hope for. Diner rescue, total, $18,750. She stared at the number, tears glistening. He wrapped her in a gentle embrace. "This is what community looks like," he murmured. Rachel realized she'd never felt more supported or more connected. The next morning, she reopened the diner with renewed purpose. The neon sign burned brighter, as though reflecting her own newfound clarity. Michael arrived before dawn with a bouquet of sunflowers, Emma's favorite. As he stepped into the warmth of the diner, Rachel greeted him with a radiant smile and a plate of fresh cinnamon raisin toast. Emma stood behind the counter, grinning mischievously. In that moment, Rachel understood that her crisis had become a turning point, transforming her diner from a business into a true haven. She knew challenges would come again, but she also knew she no longer had to face them alone. And as the aroma of coffee and pancakes filled the morning air, she made a silent promise. She would never hesitate to ask for help again, because through that plea, she had found her greatest strength. An unseasonably warm September morning found Michael driving north on Lakeshore Drive, the skyline receding behind him as he crossed into Evanston. He'd spent the day at a client pitch on campus, an exciting project with Northwestern University that had left him energized but homesick for something more authentic than polished presentations. His assistant had suggested lunch at a nearby cafe known for its neighborhood feel, and Michael, still craving the warmth he'd found at Rachel's diner, agreed without hesitation. He pulled into a modest lot behind a brick storefront on Sherman Avenue. A vintage neon sign glowed softly, Halcyon Cafe. From the outside, the place looked like any casual lunch spot. Outdoor tables dotted the patio, and a small chalkboard proclaimed today's specials: grilled chicken ciabatta, heirloom tomato soup, and an apple cinnamon latte. Michael parked, grabbed his messenger bag, and stepped inside, expecting the usual lunchtime buzz. Instead, he was greeted by the comforting clatter of dishes and the low murmur of conversation, familiar, but not quite the same as the bustling energy of Lincoln Park. He found a seat at the counter and glanced around. Cream-colored subway tiles lined the walls, and a row of potted succulents perched on a high shelf. Behind the counter, he could see a barista frothing milk and two line cooks at the grill, flipping pancakes and stirring chili. Michael scanned the staff, looking for a warm smile or a nod, but no one seemed to notice him. He checked his watch. 12:15 p.m. His stomach growled. The barista slid a menu across. Michael ordered the tomato soup and a latte, then picked up his phone to send a quick text. Running late, staying for lunch. See you this afternoon. He pocketed the phone and watched steam rise from the latte cup, swirling like ghosts of mornings at Rachel's. Just as he lifted the cup for a sip, a familiar voice called his name. He nearly choked on the frothy milk. He set the mug down, heart hammering. There, weaving through the small dining room with a pot of freshly brewed coffee, was Rachel Jacobs, floral blouse, denim apron, hair tied back in her trademark loose bun. Michael's pulse shot up. He stood abruptly, sending his chair scraping across the tile floor. "Rachel," he managed, disbelief lacing his tone. She froze mid-step, porcelain mug in hand, and glanced at him with wide eyes. For a fraction of a second, the entire room seemed to tilt. "Michael," she whispered, voice barely audible over the cafe's hum. She set the pot of coffee on the counter and hurried around to him, her cheeks flushing as she realized it really was him. He took a step forward, and they collapsed into a tight embrace, her arms around his neck, his hands on her shoulders. Foreheads pressed together in a stunned reunion. A few curious patrons glanced over, some whispering, but Rachel and Michael were cocooned in the intensity of the moment. After a heartbeat, they broke apart, Rachel's eyes shimmering with tears. "When did you get here?" she asked, voice catching. "Just now," he replied, stepping back to take in her presence. I didn't expect to see you here." He glanced around. "I thought this was your diner." Rachel gave a wry half-smile. "I had to leave Chicago for a while," she said softly, looking down at the floor. "I didn't want to burden you with my drama. I needed a fresh start." Michael's mind raced. He remembered the Diner Rescue Fund, the fundraising events, the triumph of saving her business, and also the pain she'd endured after the crisis. "Why Evanston?" he asked gently. Rachel took a breath. "I realized I needed to rebuild on my own terms. Halcyon Cafe was looking for staff, part manager, part barista, and it felt like the right challenge. Plus, my daughter Emma started middle school here, closer to my sister's house." Michael nodded, absorbing the explanation. "I'm sorry I didn't know," he said. "I should have asked when I missed you at the diner." She shook her head. "You had your own life to fix. We both agreed to let the past go." He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "But I never stopped thinking about you." Rachel looked up, eyes glistening. "I never stopped thinking about you either." They moved to a corner table, still holding each other's hands across the narrow expanse. The waiter brought Michael's soup and latte, and Rachel ordered a chicken ciabatta. As they ate, they filled each other in. Michael described the progress he'd made, how he'd refocused his marriage before ultimately divorcing Nicole, and how he'd learned to value real connections over career alone. Rachel spoke of her time in Evanston, the challenges of adapting to a new cafe, and Emma's bright smile as she navigated her new school. Neither had lost the spark that had first drawn them together, but time and distance had layered their bond with mutual respect and shared growth. After lunch, Michael slipped a business card across the table. "If you ever think about moving back," he said, voice hopeful, "I can help you find the right spot, and I know a contractor who does great work." Rachel laughed, the sound musical. "It's tempting," she admitted, "but for now, I'm where I need to be." She looked at him, sincerity plain in her gaze. "Thank you for coming." He reached out, taking her hand. "Thank you for staying." They spent the next hour walking the tree-lined streets of downtown Evanston, coffee in hand, reminiscing about Rachel's diner and the community they'd both once fought to preserve. Shops were closing early for the evening crowds, and students hustled between campus buildings. The crisp breeze carried the scent of fall, crisp apples and turning leaves, which seemed to echo the new season unfolding between them. As the sun dipped lower, Michael knew he couldn't let this reunion slip away into another missed connection. They reached the edge of Fountain Square, where lighted fountains wavered in the early dusk. Turning to Rachel, he said, "I don't know what comes next, but I'd like to be part of your life, wherever you are." Rachel paused, looking out over the dancing water. Then she turned, her expression resolute. "I'd like that too," she said. "But we have to be honest about what we both want." He nodded firmly. "Agreed." She smiled. That same warm smile that had launched their friendship at Rachel's diner months ago. "Then let's make it work." In that moment, at the heart of Evanston's quiet square, and to step forward together, two friends whose bond had weathered crisis and distance, now poised to begin its most meaningful chapter yet. In the weeks that followed their unexpected reunion in Evanston, Michael and Rachel navigated the fragile transition from friends to something deeper. Their first few dates were tentative, a lunch at Halcyon Cafe followed by strolls along Sheridan Road's lakeshore path. Coffee and conversation extending into long walks beneath the red and gold of early autumn leaves. Each outing felt both thrilling and nerve-wracking as they discovered new facets of each other beyond the roles of diner owner and loyal customer. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Michael arrived at Rachel's apartment, an upstairs flat in a converted Victorian home not far from the cafe, with a bouquet of sunflowers, Emma's favorite. He rang the bell, and Emma, now 10 years old and forever proud of her mother's strength, peeked through the door with an excited grin. "Uncle Mike," she called, tugging at his hand and pulling him inside. Rachel looked up from the kitchen, flour-dusted and smiling, as he bent to hug Emma. Watching the easy warmth between them, Michael felt a surge of belonging stronger than any boardroom victory. Over homemade mac and cheese, Emma's requested dish, and later at the kitchen table with a pot of tea, they talked about everything from favorite Halloween costumes to plans for Thanksgiving. Rachel delighted in Emma's laughter. Michael marveled at Rachel's gentle authority and her ability to juggle diner finances with parenthood. When Emma retreated to start her homework, leaving the two of them alone again, Michael reached across the table and took Rachel's hand. "This feels right," he said softly. Rachel looked into his eyes and nodded. "It does," she whispered. As October yielded to November's chill, their relationship deepened. Michael spent late evenings at the diner, helping Rachel close up and swapping stories over leftover cinnamon rolls. He introduced her to his favorite jazz bar in River North, where they danced slowly beneath low-hung lanterns, a moment that felt like reclaiming lost time. She accompanied him to a company holiday party, navigating endless small talk and introducing him proudly as "my partner," evidence of how far they'd come. Though Rachel felt out of her comfort zone in his high-rise circles, Michael's beaming pride steadied her nerves. Their weekends were a patchwork of simple pleasures. Apple picking at a farm north of the city, late-night movie marathons in his condo, walks through the Lincoln Park Zoo to see the seasonal light displays. With each shared experience, they wove together their separate lives. Rachel learning the names of Michael's favorite old-school music tracks, Michael helping Emma brainstorm science fair projects. They discovered how seamlessly laughter followed them and how natural it felt to collaborate, now on romantic plans rather than rescue fundraisers or corporate pitches. One weekend in mid-November, Michael invited Rachel and Emma to join him for a fundraiser he was organizing at Rachel's diner, a Friendsgiving feast to raise money for a local shelter. Together, they planned the menu and invited neighbors and colleagues. On the night of the event, the diner overflowed with guests who lined up for turkey sandwiches and pumpkin pie. Michael watched Rachel bustle between stations, effortlessly coordinating volunteers and charming attendees with her trademark blend of warmth and wit. At one point, she turned to him, eyes shining in the soft lamplight, and said, "We make a great team." He slid an arm around her waist and whispered, "We always have." In that moment, amidst the clatter of dishes and the murmur of grateful voices, he recognized that the partnership they had forged was ready for its next chapter. As winter approached, Michael faced a personal crossroads. He had been reluctant to introduce Rachel to his mother, knowing she had mixed feelings about his past marriage and hesitant about his choice of partner. Yet, on a snowy December afternoon, he invited them both to his family's annual holiday gathering at a cozy suburban home. Rachel arrived looking radiant in a burgundy wool coat, scarf wrapped snugly around her neck, and Emma by her side. Michael's mother, Judith, greeted them a bit awkwardly, but softened when she saw how lovingly Michael interacted with Rachel and how Emma's laughter filled the foyer. Over roasted vegetables and gingerbread cookies, Michael's family came to appreciate Rachel's sincerity, and Rachel's family delighted in Michael's steady kindness. By the end of the evening, Judith tapped Rachel on the arm and said quietly, "You make him happy." Rachel, eyes misting, squeezed Judith's hand in gratitude, proof that this new love had the power to heal old wounds and bridge generational divides. In January, with the new year unfolding, Michael and Rachel took a weekend retreat to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a quaint lakeside town perfect for ice skating and cozy fireplaces. They rented a small cottage with wooden beams and a stone hearth, spending days exploring the frozen lake and evenings curled up under blankets, reading by the fire. On their second night, as snow drifted softly outside, Michael emerged from the bedroom holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He offered one to Rachel, who sat in an armchair by the fire. She accepted it, and they clinked mugs, laughter warming the silence. Then he set his mug aside, drew a small box from his pocket, and knelt on one knee before her. "Rachel," he began, voice steady despite his pounding heart, "you taught me what it means to truly share life, to laugh, to stand by each other in crisis, and to build something real. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in Rachel's eyes as she nodded and whispered, "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced amid the crackling firelight, the promise of a shared future burning brighter than any hearth. Returning to Chicago as fiancés, they navigated the excitement of wedding planning with the same collaborative spirit that had saved the diner. They chose a small celebration in late spring at an outdoor garden venue, inviting friends, family, and loyal regulars from both Rachel's Diner and Halcyon Cafe. Emma served as Rachel's maid of honor, the first public symbol of their united families. Michael wrote heartfelt vows that referenced pancakes and coffee pots, the diner's neon glow, and the unexpected paths that brought them together. Rachel's vows spoke of resilience, community, and the joy of finding a partner who believed in her both personally and professionally. Their wedding day dawned sunny and mild. As Rachel walked down the floral-draped aisle toward Michael, her mother on one arm, Emma proudly holding the train, Michael felt time still. The city's hustle faded away, leaving only the soft music and Rachel's smile. When they exchanged rings beneath a blossom-heavy arbor, the applause that followed felt like a communal embrace. Friends and family gathered afterward under white tents, sharing stories of how their relationship had healed old wounds and created new beginnings. In every embrace, every congratulatory hug, Michael and Rachel felt the unmistakable support of a community that had watched their love story unfold. That evening, as guests danced beneath string lights, Rachel slipped away with Michael to stand by a quiet corner of the garden. Snow-white petals drifted down like confetti, spring's gentle farewell. He wrapped an arm around her and whispered, "This is just the beginning." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the the sparkle of her engagement ring catching the light. "Our greatest chapter," she replied. In the days that followed, as they settled into married life, Michael and Rachel continued to blend their worlds with the same open-hearted partnership that had defined their friendship. They remodeled a small portion of the diner to include a coffee bar, where Michael could take morning shifts and test his new latte art skills. Rachel visited Michael at his office, where she delivered surprise pastries and helped him brainstorm community outreach ideas. Emma moved comfortably between their homes, enjoying movie nights in Michael's condo and pancake mornings at Halcyon Cafe. Their love, born from crisis and nurtured by shared vulnerability, had blossomed into a foundation stronger than either had dreamed. Michael no longer saw his achievements in isolation. They were enriched by Rachel's laughter, her wisdom, and the steadfast support they offered one another. Rachel no longer bore the weight of her struggles alone. She had a partner who believed in her dreams and stood by her side through every challenge. In the warmth of spring's return, as the city emerged from winter's hush, Michael and Rachel walked hand in hand through Lincoln Park, the promise of new beginnings all around them. Cherry blossoms whispered in the breeze, bicycles rang bells on nearby paths, a couple shared ice cream cones on a bench. And at that moment, they both understood that love, like the seasons, unfolds in its own time, and that the dawn of their new love was the brightest season of all. The garden behind Halcyon Cafe in Evanston was awash in spring blossoms when Michael and Rachel finally said, "I do." Their ceremony was anything but grandiose. No cathedral organ, no tuxedos with tails, but it was perfect in its simplicity, anchored by the community that had sustained them from the day their friendship began. Rows of white folding chairs lined a grassy aisle, each adorned with a single sunflower tied by twine, a nod to Emma's favorite flower and to the humble arrangements at Rachel's diner. A wooden arbor, draped in wisteria and twinkling fairy lights, framed the couple as they stood before their family, friends, and a handful of loyal regulars who had become part of their story. Emma, radiant in a pale yellow dress and clutching a small bouquet of daisies, led the way down the aisle, her grin wide enough to light the entire space. She paused to hand Rachel a single sunflower before taking her place as maid of honor. Michael watched from the front row, crisp in a charcoal suit and a light blue tie that matched his mother's shawl. When Rachel emerged, walking arm in arm with her sister, her smile took his breath away. She wore a simple white linen gown with soft lace trim, comfortable yet elegant, perfect for a woman who valued authenticity over extravagance. The officiant, a longtime friend of Rachel's from the diner community, spoke of love as nourishment, how it feeds us, sustains us through cold seasons, and brings out the best in each of us. He quoted their favorite analogy, coffee and pancakes. Some may dismiss these as simple pleasures, but in the right company, they become the perfect pairing. Laughter rippled through the guests as Michael and Rachel exchanged knowing glances. When it came time to speak their vows, Michael pulled out a small leather notebook, leafing to a page filled with penciled lines. "Rachel, you are my morning light, the warmth in every cup of coffee and the sweetness at the start of every day. You taught me that true success is not measured in sales or titles but in the depth of our connections. I promise to stand by you in crisis and in celebration, to listen as deeply as you have always listened to me, and to share every sunrise and sunset for the rest of our days." He closed the notebook, looked deeply into her eyes, and slipped a simple silver band onto her finger. Rachel's vow was equally heartfelt. "Michael, you are my steadfast oak, grounding me when my doubts threaten to uproot my dreams. You showed me that asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. I promise to build with you a life rich in laughter and purpose, to cherish every ordinary moment as extraordinary, and to walk hand in hand with you into all our tomorrows." When they kissed, a collective cheer rose from the guests, and Emma let loose a triumphant squeal of approval. As the new Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs, Winters walked back down the aisle, sunflower petals showered them like confetti. The reception was held under white canopies strung with lanterns and fairy lights. Long wooden tables bore mason jars of wildflowers, stacks of plates filled with comfort food favorites from both the diner and the cafe, mini breakfast sliders, pumpkin pecan waffles, chicken and waffle bites, and a towering three-tier cake adorned with sunflower accents. Michael's family from Chicago and Rachel's neighbors from Evanston mingled easily, united by stories of resilience and renewed love. One of the diner's regulars, a retired teacher named Mrs. Alvarez, raised her glass and toasted to two people who proved that friendship can save a life and love can be found in the most unexpected places. Glasses chimed, and the string quartet struck up a lively tune. As the golden hour deepened into evening, Michael pulled Rachel aside for a quiet dance on a small wooden platform at the edge of the lawn. They moved slowly, the strains of a soft jazz melody swirling around them. Michael pressed his forehead to hers and inhaled the scent of wisteria and jasmine. "I still can't believe how lucky I am," he whispered. Rachel smiled against his chest. "Every day," she replied, "you show me the joy in ordinary moments." The lantern light flickered across their faces, illuminating the promise in their eyes. After dinner and dancing, guests were invited to gather around a bonfire. Emma and a few neighborhood kids roasted marshmallows for s'mores, while others sat on hay bales sipping hot chocolate from special-themed travel mugs Michael had prepared. Late into the night, conversations ranged from favorite childhood breakfasts to plans for future brunch gatherings at the diner. When at last the fire dwindled, Michael and Rachel bid goodbye to the last of their friends. Palms warm and hearts full. In the hush that followed, they stood alone under a canopy of stars. Michael slipped his hand into Rachel's, and they walked together toward the cafe's back entrance. Inside, the familiar glow of the coffee bar greeted them. He retrieved a small box from the counter, a future gift from the halcyon team, and handed it to her. Inside was a hand-thrown ceramic mug, inscribed with the words, "Love, brewed daily." Rachel laughed softly, tears gleaming. "It's perfect," she said, slipping it into her pocket. The next morning, Michael woke before dawn in their guest room above the cafe. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Rachel, and tiptoed downstairs to the coffee bar. As he prepared espresso shots, his thoughts drifted to how this wedding marked not just the union of two hearts, but the merging of two families and two lives built on resilience. He took a deep breath of the rich aroma, letting it anchor him in gratitude. Back in the room, Rachel stirred awake. She patted down in her robe, finding Michael at the counter. "Morning," she murmured. He smiled and handed her a steaming mug. "To new beginnings," he toasted. They clinked cups and sat together on the bar stools, watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan through the cafe's front window. Rachel took a slow sip and then placed her mug down, her expression shifting, a sudden softness in her gaze. "Mike," she said, voice trembling slightly. He turned to her, sensing the weight in her words. I took one of those early tests this morning." He watched her carefully. "And?" he prompted gently. She reached into her robe pocket and held out a small plastic stick with two bright pink lines. Michael's heart leapt. She nodded, tears brimming. "We're going to be parents." Her smile was radiant. He blinked, processing the moment, then swept her into a fierce embrace. "We're going to be parents," he echoed, voice cracking with joy. They sank back onto the stools, foreheads pressed together. As the first customers began to file in for their morning brew, Michael poured 2 shots of espresso, and they toasted again, this time to the dawning of not just a marriage, but a family. He ran a hand gently across her belly, already envisioning the life growing within her. "I promise to love you and our child," he whispered. "Every day, with the same care you've shown me." Rachel nodded against him. "We'll face every challenge together," she replied, "just like we always have." Outside, the cafe lights illuminated the sidewalk as neighbors gathered for morning coffee, blissfully unaware of the life-changing news being celebrated inside. In the days that followed, Michael and Rachel navigated the excitement of early parenthood news with the same collaborative spirit that had guided their friendship and their relationship. They made appointments with a local OB/GYN recommended by halcyon staff, planned cozy evenings cooking together in the cafe's small kitchen, and spent quiet mornings sharing baby name lists written on napkins. Emma beamed as she carefully selected illustrations for a nursery wall, and Michael's mother called daily with enthusiastic congratulations and stories about babysitting adventures. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, late-night feedings, diaper runs, balancing work and family, they felt ready. Their journey had taught them that support and love are forged through vulnerability, perseverance, and genuine connection. As they stood in the gentle glow of the cafe's morning light, arms wrapped around each other and hope blossoming all around, Michael and Rachel knew that their simple wedding and the joyful news of impending parenthood marked not an end, but the most beautiful beginning of all. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.